What if Earth stopped spinning for 5 seconds? Have you ever been in a car that slammed on the brakes at highway speed? That lurch forward, that sickening feeling of your body continuing to move while the metal around you suddenly stops. Now multiply that feeling by 1,000. Actually, make that 10,000. Because that's exactly what would happen if the Earth suddenly stopped spinning. But here's the terrifying part. You wouldn't even see it coming. Because right now, at this very moment, while you're reading these words, you're hurtling through space at over 1,600 kilometers per hour. You're moving faster than the speed of sound. You're a passenger on a planet that's been spinning continuously for 4.6 billion years, ever since clouds of gas and dust clumped together to form our solar system. And you feel absolutely nothing. It's the greatest magic trick in the universe. Everything moves together, so everything feels still. It's a perfect illusion. A beautiful, deadly illusion. But what if that stopped? What if, for just 5 seconds, the Earth came to a complete halt? 5 seconds. That's less time than it takes to sneeze twice. Less time than it takes to blink a few times. Less time than it takes to read this sentence out loud. Surely, 5 seconds couldn't change everything. Right, wrong. So very, very wrong. This isn't a drill. This isn't science fiction. This is physics. And physics doesn't care about your feelings. The physics of absolute disaster. Here's what would happen. The Earth stops. You don't. Neither does the air. Neither do the oceans. Neither do the buildings you're sitting in. Every single thing on the planet's surface is still moving at hundreds of kilometers per hour because of something called inertia. Inertia is physics' elegant way of saying things don't stop moving just because you want them to. Objects in motion stay in motion. That's one of Newton's laws. It's been true for 400 years. It will be true for 400 more. And it's about to become the most terrifying truth in human history. Think about what that means. At the equator, the ground beneath your feet suddenly becomes stationary. But your body is still traveling eastward at 1,670 kilometers per hour. That's not a stumble. That's not a fall. That's being launched sideways at speeds that make the strongest tornadoes ever recorded look like a gentle breeze. The most powerful F5 tornadoes on Earth have wind speeds of about 500 kilometers per hour. They rip houses off their foundation. They turn cars into projectiles. They tear apart concrete structures like paper. The winds from Earth's sudden stop would be more than 3 times stronger than that. You wouldn't be blown away. You'd be obliterated. Your body wouldn't be found. Your body would be particles. But let's slow down. Let's actually trace this disaster second by second. Second 1. The Earth stops. For 1 full second, nothing has happened to you yet. You're still moving. So is the air. That's important because right now the air is moving with us. That's why we don't feel constant 1,000-kilometer-per-hour winds. The atmosphere is basically a giant blanket spinning along with the planet. The winds we do feel are just the differences in speed between different parts of that blanket. But if the ground stops and the air keeps moving, the blanket doesn't just stay a blanket. It becomes a weapon. In that first second, the air near the equator is still moving eastward at over 1,600 kilometers per hour. It hits the stationary ground like a wall. The result is instantaneous supersonic winds that would make the strongest hurricanes look like a sneeze. And here's the most terrifying part. These winds don't just blow. They shred. They don't push you over. They take you apart. Imagine every tree, every building, every car, every person being slammed by a wall of air moving at speeds faster than a commercial jet. Concrete crumbles. Steel bends. Glass shatters into a billion razor-sharp fragments that are now also moving at over 1,600 kilometers per hour. In that first second, the surface of the Earth, at least near the equator, stops being recognizable. Cities don't collapse. They disintegrate. The tallest skyscrapers aren't blown over. They're ripped apart from the inside. As windows and walls and supports are torn out by the wind, millions of tons of debris become shrapnel. And that shrapnel keeps moving, hitting other things, creating more shrapnel, until the whole area becomes a storm of pulverized concrete and twisted metal. By the end of second 1, the equator has become something else entirely. It's not a place anymore. It's a blender. an unimaginably large blender. Second 2. Now the oceans. Oh, the oceans. The Earth's rotation doesn't just affect the atmosphere, it affects the water too. The massive volume of water in the oceans is also moving eastward at over 1,600 kilometers per hour. When the planet stops, that water doesn't stop. It keeps going. But unlike air, which can compress and flow around things, water has nowhere to go. It's trapped by continents, so it does the only thing it can do. It piles up. In that second too, the Pacific Ocean, the Atlantic Ocean, the Indian Ocean, all of them suddenly surge eastward as if an invisible hand has shoved them. Trillions upon trillions of tons of water move in a single unstoppable wall. This isn't a tsunami. Tsunamis are born from underwater earthquakes and travel at maybe 800 kilometers per hour, which is already devastating. But a wall of water moving at over 1,600 kilometers per hour, that's something else entirely. That's a planetary tidal wave. It's a flood that doesn't just cover coastline, it erases coastlines. Entire continents are reshaped in seconds. The water doesn't gently lap at the shore. It hits with the force of thousands of nuclear bombs, exploding simultaneously. Mountain ranges get flattened. Valleys become inland seas. Islands disappear as if they never existed. But wait, it gets worse. As that wall of water moves eastward, it drags the air around it, creating even more wind. The debris that was already flying around from second 1 gets caught in this new storm of water and air. Imagine being hit by wind moving at supersonic speed, while simultaneously being slammed by a wall of water carrying cars, buildings, and chunks of the Earth itself. Second 2 is when the planet stops being recognizable to anyone who knew it before. Satellites watching from space would see the entire equator turn brown from the dust, and then blue again from the water, and then gray from the debris. Second 3. Now let's talk about the rocks. The Earth's crust is not a single piece. It's made of tectonic plates that are constantly moving, bumping into each other, sliding past each other, creating earthquakes, volcanoes, and mountains. These plates move at about the speed that your fingernails grow. It's slow. It's gradual. Over millions of years, it reshapes continents, but suddenly stopping the Earth's rotation. That's not gradual. That's catastrophic. In second 3, the sudden change in momentum sends shockwaves through the planet's interior. The liquid outer core, which generates our magnetic field, sloshes violently. The solid inner core, which is about the size of the moon, experiences forces it hasn't felt since the Earth was formed. The result is earthquakes. Not just big earthquakes, all the earthquakes. Every fault line in the world ruptures simultaneously. The San Andreas Fault gives way. The Ring of Fire explodes. Entire continents shudder. But this isn't just shaking. This is the planet trying to tear itself apart. The magnitude of these quakes would be so high that our current earthquake scales wouldn't even be able to measure them. They'd be off the charts. Buildings that somehow survived the wind and water are now crumbling from the ground up. The ground beneath your feet becomes a liquid, a phenomenon called liquefaction, where solid soil turns into mud and swallows everything on top of it. Roads crack open, rivers change course, mountains rise and fall in seconds. The surface of the Earth becomes something that looks more like a boiling pot of soup than a solid planet. The shockwaves travel through the entire planet, meeting on the other side and bouncing back, creating even more destruction. This is second 3, and by the end of it, a good portion of the Earth's crust has effectively rearranged itself. The map of the world will never be the same. Second 4, now the fire. All of this destruction has created massive amounts of heat. Friction from the wind and the water and the grinding rocks generates temperatures that can ignite anything flammable. Gas lines break, power lines spark, oil refineries, the ones that haven't been completely destroyed, explode. The atmosphere, now filled with pulverized debris, dust, and chemicals, becomes highly combustible. Wildfires erupt everywhere at once. The entire planet, or at least what's left of it, starts to burn. The fires create their own weather systems. Fire tornadoes form, spinning at incredible speeds and sucking in even more oxygen, making the fires hotter and more intense. The sky turns black with smoke. The sun disappears. The temperature drops dramatically in some places, while skyrocketing in others. The fires create so much carbon dioxide and particulate matter that the atmosphere becomes toxic. Breathing becomes impossible, not just because the air is filled with dust, but because the chemistry of the air itself has changed. Second 4 is when the survivors, if there are any, start to realize they're not going to make it. The air is thick with ash. The water is contaminated with debris and chemicals. The ground is still shaking, still moving, still shifting. There's no shelter. There's no safety. There's just chaos. In this second, the damage is no longer physical. It's biological. Every living thing that somehow survived the winds, the water, and the earthquakes is now facing a new threat: suffocation. The fires have consumed so much oxygen that the air is becoming unbreathable. Animals drop dead from lack of air. Plants, the ones still standing, are burning or buried. The entire biosphere is collapsing. The web of life, that delicate, beautiful, intricate web that took billions of years to weave, is being torn apart in seconds, and there's nothing anyone can do to stop it. Second 5, and then the Earth starts spinning again. Because remember, this was only supposed to last 5 seconds. The planet's rotation resumes, but things don't go back to normal. They can't. The momentum of everything that was moving is now gone. The debris, the water, the air, it's all still trying to settle back into a stable state, but there's nothing stable about what's left. The oceans, which surged eastward, now slosh back westward, creating another wave of destruction. The tectonic plates, which were jarred violently, are now grinding against each other in new ways, creating new fault lines, new earthquakes, new volcanoes. The fires continue to burn for weeks, months, even years. The dust and ash remain in the atmosphere for decades. But here's the truly terrifying part. You might think the worst is over, that after 5 seconds, after the spinning resumes, the survivors can start to rebuild. But the planet has been changed permanently. The sudden stop has altered the Earth's rotation. Not by much, maybe a few milliseconds, but enough to affect the length of our days and the tilt of our axis. The climate is thrown into chaos. The jet streams are gone. The ocean currents are disrupted. Weather patterns are destroyed. The tropics freeze. The poles melt. Entire ecosystems collapse. The Great Barrier Reef, the Amazon rainforest, the Siberian tundra, all of them are gone. The biodiversity that took millions of years to evolve is wiped out in 5 seconds. And here's the cruelest part of all. The damage isn't just to the planet, it's to us. If there are survivors, and that's a big if, they're not going to have it easy. The infrastructure that supports modern civilization is gone. The power grids, the water systems, the communication networks, all destroyed. There's no food, no medicine, no shelter. The survivors, scattered and isolated, would have to start from scratch. Hunter-gatherers again, Stone Age technology, but with one difference. The planet they're trying to survive on is now actively hostile. The climate is unstable. The ground is unstable. The air is toxic. The water is scarce. The eastern and western hemispheres. But here's something that most people don't realize. The disaster wouldn't be the same everywhere. It depends on where you are. At the equator, where the rotational speed is highest, the winds would be at their strongest. At the poles, where the rotational speed is nearly zero, you'd barely feel the wind. If you were standing at the North Pole when the Earth stopped, you'd barely stumble. You'd just stand there, surrounded by ice, wondering why everything else suddenly exploded. The equator would be a death zone, scoured clean by supersonic winds and mega tsunamis. The mid-latitudes, where most of the world's population lives, would be a hellscape of hurricanes, fires, and earthquakes. But the poles would be relatively safe from the wind and water. They'd still have to deal with the earthquakes, the fires, the toxic atmosphere. But at least they wouldn't be thrown into the air at thousands of kilometers per hour. That's the most messed up part of this whole scenario. The amount of destruction you'd face depends entirely on where you happen to be standing at that exact second. A businessman in Singapore at the equator is pulverized instantly. A scientist in Antarctica barely feels a thing, and the poor bastard sitting in London, he's somewhere in between. He's thrown sideways at maybe 1,000 kilometers per hour. He hits a wall. He's done. But his friend in Paris, also done. But the guy in Tromsø, Norway, above the Arctic Circle, he might actually survive the first few seconds. He might even live to see the aftermath, which is a blessing and a curse, because what he'd see would be worse than death. The long-term consequences. Let's talk about what happens after those 5 seconds. The planet survives. It has to. It's been spinning for 4.6 billion years. A 5-second pause, even a catastrophic one, isn't going to destroy it, but it could end us. The magnetic field, generated by the Earth's rotation, would be disrupted. The magnetic field protects us from solar radiation. Without it, the sun's radiation would cook the surface. Cancer rates would skyrocket. The atmosphere, damaged and depleted, would offer less protection. The ozone layer, already fragile, would be shredded by the radiation and the debris. The Earth would become a radioactive hellhole. Not from nuclear weapons, but from the sun itself. That's the irony of it all. We're protected by the very thing that just tried to kill us. The rotation that spins the planet and sends us hurtling through space is also the reason we're alive. It's what keeps the atmosphere in place. It's what creates the magnetic field. It's what drives the weather. And it's what keeps us from baking in the sun's radiation. So when that rotation stops, even for a few seconds, we lose our shield, our protection, our cocoon, and we become exposed to the full fury of the cosmos. But there's another long-term consequence. The debris from the disaster would create a cloud around the planet. That cloud would block out the sun. Temperatures would plummet. The Earth would enter a winter that could last for years. Crops would fail. Animals would die. The survivors would starve. And the cold would finish what the wind and water started. Could it actually happen? Now for the reality check. Could this actually happen? Is there any scenario where the Earth just stops spinning for 5 seconds? The short answer is no. The long answer is also no. The Earth is spinning because it's been spinning since it formed. There's no natural force that could suddenly stop it. Even a massive asteroid impact, the kind that killed the dinosaurs, wouldn't stop the Earth. It would change the rotation a tiny bit, maybe by a fraction of a second, but it wouldn't stop it. To actually stop the Earth, you'd need something with incredible power, something like a collision with another planet. And even then, the Earth wouldn't stop. It would be destroyed, or at least completely reshaped. So the good news is this scenario is impossible. The bad news is we've just spent the last few minutes imagining something that can never happen. But that's the point of thought experiments. They're not about predicting the future. They're about understanding the present, about appreciating what we have, about recognizing how fragile this spinning ball of rock and water really is. The deeper meaning, because here's the thing, we take it for granted. We wake up every morning and the sun rises, the seasons change, the tides come and go, and we never stop to think about why. We never stop to think about the massive, invisible forces that make all of this possible. The rotation of the Earth is the most fundamental thing in our lives. It's the rhythm of our existence. It's the source of day and night. It's the engine of our climate. It's the reason we have season. It's the reason we have life. And we treat it like it's nothing, like it's just a fact, like it's just something that happens. But it's not nothing. It's everything. It's the difference between a habitable world and a dead one. It's the difference between us and the millions of other species that didn't make it. It's the difference between life and extinction. And we're just here, spinning along with it, completely oblivious to the miracle that's happening every single second. That's what this thought experiment is really about. It's not about disaster. It's about awe. It's about wonder. It's about gratitude. It's about understanding that this planet, this spinning, speeding, beautiful planet, is a gift, and we are the lucky ones who get to ride it. So the next time you feel the ground beneath your feet, remember, you're not standing still. You're moving at over 1,000 kilometers per hour. You're hurtling through space on a rock that's been spinning for billions of years. And if it ever stopped, even for 5 seconds, everything would change. Everything would end. Everything would begin again. But not in a way you'd recognize. Not in a way you'd survive. So be grateful for the spin. Be grateful for the speed. Be grateful for this impossible, improbable, miraculous ride we're all on. Because it's the only one we've got. And it's beautiful. That's the truth. That's the reality. And that's the real question this whole thought experiment is asking. It's not what if Earth stopped spinning, it's what would we lose if it did? And the answer is everything. Absolutely everything.